In the quiet corners of Hyrule's vast mythology, where legends whisper through ancient texts and forgotten memories, there exists a figure whose very essence has captivated minds for generations. Not the princess trapped in towers, nor the dark lord seeking dominion, but a simple hero whose pointed ears and emerald garb have become synonymous with adventure itself. Tonight, we venture into the labyrinthine depths of Link's existence. Every forgotten detail, every curious quirk, every seemingly insignificant thread that weaves together the tapestry of gaming's most enduring protagonist. Prepare to discover truths both profound and wonderfully useless about the legendary hero of time. In the depths of Nintendo's creative archives, long before pixels gave birth to legend, there lived an idea. It was 1985, and Shigeru Miyamoto found himself contemplating the challenge of creating a character who would stand apart in the primitive landscape of 8-bit graphics. The Famicom's limitations were severe, each sprite a mere collection of colored squares, each animation frame precious as gold. Yet from these constraints would emerge one of gaming's most enduring icons, born not from grand design documents or market research, but from the whispered memories of childhood fairy tales. The first spark of inspiration came from an unexpected source. Deep within Miyamoto's consciousness, planted during countless evenings of childhood wonder, lay the image of a boy who refused to grow up. Peter Pan, that eternal child of Neverland, with his pointed ears, forest green attire, and other worldly grace, had captured the imagination of generations. Takashi Tezuka, the brilliant artist tasked with bringing Link to life in pixels, recognized this connection immediately. Here was their answer to the sprite readability problem that plagued early game development. But why Peter Pan, you might wonder? The connection runs deeper than mere aesthetic choice. Both characters embody the eternal child, the one who ventures into magical realms where adults fear to tread. Both wield small blades against impossible odds. Both command the loyalty of fairy companions, and both exist in that liminal space between childhood innocence and heroic responsibility. In Peter Pan's Neverland, time stands still. In Hyrule, Link exists in an eternal cycle of reincarnation, forever young, forever beginning his journey anew. The pointed ears that would become Link's signature weren't merely borrowed from Disney's interpretation, however. Tezuka reached back through centuries of European folklore to the ancient traditions of elves and woodland sprites that had captivated human imagination since medieval times. In Anglo-Saxon England, elves were neither the diminutive garden dwellers of modern fancy nor the noble beings of Tolkien's Middle-earth. They were something more mysterious. Creatures who existed between worlds, who possessed knowledge beyond mortal understanding, who could slip between the realm of the everyday and the domain of magic with startling ease. The Scandinavian traditions spoke of Alfar, beings of light and shadow, who served as messengers between gods and mortals. Their elongated ears were not merely aesthetic. They were functional, allowing them to hear the whispers of wind through leaves, the subtle songs of growing things, the distant calls of their divine masters. In Germanic folklore, elves were the eternal guardians of natural places, forever young, forever watchful. These weren't creatures of weakness or whimsy. They were beings of power and purpose, touched by forces beyond human comprehension. When Tezuka crafted Link's distinctive silhouette, he was drawing from this deep well of mythological significance. The pointed ears weren't just a visual quirk. They were a statement of otherworldly perception, a sign that this hero could hear things others could not. The long cap wasn't merely practical headwear. It was a symbol of the eternal child, the one who carries wonder like a banner into worlds grown dark with adult concerns. The green clothing choice emerged from practical necessities that would, in retrospect, seem almost prophetic. Against the limited color palettes of early gaming systems, green provided the perfect contrast to dungeon shadows and golden treasures. It stood out against brown earth and gray stone, yet blended harmoniously with the natural world that Link would so often traverse. Green was the color of growing things, of life persisting in dark places, of hope sprouting from barren ground. Yet there's another layer to this chromatic choice that few remember. Green, in the folk traditions that inspired Link's creation, was the color of the other world. It was the hue worn by those who existed between realms, neither fully human nor entirely divine. In Celtic mythology, the Green Knight challenged mortal heroes not with sword alone, but with riddles of honor and courage that tested the very essence of their character. Link's green tunic carries this tradition forward, marking him as a figure who belongs neither entirely to the world of ordinary mortals, nor to the realm of gods and monsters. The technical constraints that shaped Link's early appearance created a character design of remarkable efficiency. Every pixel served multiple purposes. The pointed ears immediately communicated his otherworldly nature to players who might never read a manual or follow the story deeply. The distinctive cap created a recognizable silhouette, even at tiny sprite sizes. The green tunic provided visual coherence across different backgrounds and lighting conditions. What might have been mere practical decisions became the foundation of an icon that would endure for decades. But perhaps most fascinating is how these design choices created a character who seemed to embody the very spirit of adventure itself. Link's appearance suggests someone prepared for anything, the pointed ears of one who listens to wind and whisper, the practical clothing of someone equally at home in royal courts and wild forests, the youthful features of one who approaches each challenge with fresh wonder rather than weary cynicism. The cultural DNA embedded in Link's design runs deeper than any single inspiration. He carries within his pixels the accumulated weight of every hero who ever ventured into dark woods, every child who ever believed in magic, every storyteller who ever kindled hope in hearts grown cold with doubt. From Robin Hood's green garb to Peter Pan's eternal youth, from elfin ears that hear divine whispers to the simple courage of fairy tale heroes, Link became a vessel for humanity's oldest and most enduring dreams. This synthesis of influences created something unexpected, a character who felt both entirely new and comfortingly familiar. Players encountering Link for the first time in 1986 experienced a recognition that transcended conscious thought. Here was the hero they had always imagined, the protagonist of dreams they'd carried since childhood, given form and purpose in a medium that was itself learning to dream. The origins of Link remind us that the most powerful creations often emerge not from committee decisions or focus groups, but from the deep wellsprings of human imagination, from fairy tales told by firelight, from myths whispered across generations, from the eternal human need to believe that somewhere, in some green wood or hidden kingdom, heroes still walk among us, ready to answer when darkness falls. Across the sprawling timeline of Hyrule's history, one truth emerges with startling consistency. No two links are precisely alike, yet all share an unmistakable essence that transcends the boundaries of individual incarnation. Like light refracting through a prism, the hero's spirit manifests differently in each era, shaped by the needs of his time and the limitations of the medium through which his story unfolds. To truly understand Link, we must examine not just his legendary deeds, but the curious variations in his physical form that reveal the deeper mysteries of heroic reincarnation. The question of Link's height has puzzled scholars and players alike for decades. In the earliest adventures, such measurements seemed irrelevant. Pixels gave no sense of true scale, and Link appeared as large or small as the screen demanded. Yet as the series evolved into 3 dimensions, these details became impossible to ignore. The Link of Ocarina of Time, in his adult form, stands approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall. Decidedly average for a legendary hero, yet perfectly suited for one who must move unseen through hostile territories and slip through spaces that might challenge larger warriors. This measurement becomes more intriguing when we consider the temporal mechanics of his growth. The 7-year slumber that transforms child Link into adult Link represents more than mere passage of time. It's a metaphysical transformation that defies conventional biology. The child who falls asleep at 4 feet 2 inches awakens as a fully formed adult, muscle memory intact, sword skills mysteriously perfected. His body bears no scars from battles never fought, no calluses from training never undertaken. He is, in essence, the ideal of what he might have become, crystallized in flesh and bone. But the height variations across different incarnations tell an even stranger story. The Link of Twilight Princess towers above his Ocarina counterpart at nearly 6 feet tall, his wolfish transformation having perhaps left subtle changes in his human form. The Wind Waker's tune, Link, by contrast, maintains the proportions of eternal childhood, his cartoon aesthetics masking a deliberate choice to preserve the innocence that adult responsibilities might corrupt. Each height reflects not just artistic direction, but a philosophical stance on what heroism demands of those who carry its burden. The matter of Link's age presents perhaps the most fascinating puzzle in the hero's physical existence. Official sources place the various Links between 7 and 17 years old, yet these numbers feel almost arbitrary when considered against the scope of their achievements. The 7-year-old Link of Ocarina of Time's opening possesses survival skills that would challenge experienced woodsmen. He navigates complex social situations, solves intricate puzzles, and wields weapons with an intuitive mastery that speaks to knowledge embedded deeper than conscious memory. This precocious competence suggests that each Link carries within his young frame the accumulated wisdom of countless predecessors. When the 10-year-old hero of Wind Waker first grasps a sword, his stance is perfect without instruction. When the 12-year-old Link of Twilight Princess encounters his first enemy, his reactions flow from instincts that transcend individual experience. They are not merely children thrust into heroic roles. They are vessels for an ancient expertise that manifests whenever the world's need grows dire. The tragedy of this eternal youth becomes apparent when we consider what these Links sacrifice for their heroic calling. They experience childhood through the lens of cosmic responsibility, their formative years shaped by encounters with death, betrayal, and the weight of entire kingdoms' survival. Yet perhaps this is precisely why the hero must remain young. Adults, burdened by cynicism and the knowledge of limitations, might hesitate where children rush forward with pure intention. Among the most consistently overlooked aspects of Link's physical form is the matter of handedness. Throughout most of his appearances, Link wields his sword with his left hand, a detail that seems minor until we consider its implications. Left-handedness occurs in approximately 10% of the human population, making Link part of a statistical minority that has carried cultural significance throughout history. In many traditions, left-handed individuals were considered touched by otherworldly forces, marked by fate for roles that differed from ordinary mortals. This sinister tendency, literally meaning left-sided, takes on deeper meaning when we remember that Link exists between worlds. His left-handed swordsmanship marks him as fundamentally different from the conventional heroes of legend, most of whom wielded their blades in the traditional right-handed manner. When Link raises his shield with his right hand and sword with his left, he creates a defensive stance that mirrors his role as protector of the natural order against forces of chaos. The shift to right-handed combat in later games represents more than mere accommodation for control schemes. It reflects a subtle alteration in Link's relationship to his world. The right hand, traditionally associated with righteousness and conventional strength, perhaps suggests a hero more aligned with established order than revolutionary change. Yet in Breath of the Wild, ambidextrous combat returns, allowing Link to adapt his grip based on necessity rather than tradition, embodying a hero freed from conventional expectations. The piercing blue eyes that gaze from beneath Link's distinctive bangs carry their own weight of significance. Across every incarnation, regardless of other physical variations, these azure depths remain constant, windows to a soul that persists through cycles of death and rebirth. Blue eyes in folklore often indicate divine favor or otherworldly sight, the ability to perceive truths hidden from ordinary vision. Link's gaze can distinguish friend from foe, even when magic obscures their true nature, can spot hidden passages that escape normal observation, can look upon the faces of gods and demons alike without losing his essential humanity. These eyes have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the corruption of friends, the redemption of enemies. They have gazed upon the creation of worlds and the twilight of ages. Yet they maintain the clarity of youth, unmarked by the cynicism that such experiences might typically engender. In this, we see perhaps the most miraculous aspect of Link's recurring incarnation, his ability to approach each crisis with fresh wonder, to see possibility where others perceive only doom. The subtle variations in Link's hair color across different games reflect not mere artistic choice, but deeper truths about the nature of heroic identity. The sandy blonde of most incarnations suggests someone touched by sunlight, marked by long hours in open air and honest labor. Yet the darker hues that appear in certain titles hint at a hero shaped by shadow, one who has walked in darker places and emerged marked but not corrupted by the experience. This chromatic variation extends to the very texture of his hair, which remains perpetually tousled despite his often formal encounters with royalty and divine beings. It's the hair of someone who sleeps under stars more often than silk, who runs through forests and climbs cliffs without concern for courtly appearance. Yet it never becomes unkempt or dirty, another subtle indicator of the magical nature of his existence. where heroic necessity transcends mundane concerns like grooming and hygiene. Perhaps most remarkably, Link's physical capabilities seem to exist in a state of constant impossibility that players accept without question. His ability to swing massive two-handed swords with single-handed ease, to leap distances that would challenge Olympic athletes, to survive falls that would shatter ordinary bones. These feats speak to a physiology that operates according to laws more mythic than medical. The Link who can lift and hurl boulders weighing several times his own body mass, who can draw bowstrings that should require mechanical advantage, who can run for hours without fatigue while carrying enough equipment to stock a small army. This is not merely an athletic human, but something approaching a demigod. Yet his appearance remains persistently humble, his slight frame and youthful features suggesting vulnerability, even as he demonstrates power that transcends mortal limitations. This paradox of appearance versus capability reflects the deeper mystery of heroic calling. True heroes, the legends suggest, are not those who look the part, but those who rise to meet impossible demands with resources they shouldn't possess. Link's unassuming physical presence makes his achievements more remarkable, not less. When David faces Goliath, we remember the battle precisely because the outcome seemed so unlikely. The scars that Link does not bear tell stories as profound as those he might carry. Despite countless battles with creatures that should leave lasting marks, despite exposure to magical forces that should twist and change his form, despite the spiritual weight of bearing the Triforce of Courage, Link emerges from each adventure physically unmarked. His skin remains clear, his limbs straight and strong, his features uncorrupted by the darkness he faces. This perpetual restoration speaks to the nature of heroic sacrifice, that those who give everything to protect others are themselves protected by forces beyond understanding. Link's unmarked flesh becomes a canvas upon which each new adventure can write its story, unburdened by the visible weight of past struggles. He carries his scars internally, in the depths of eyes that have seen too much, in the gravity that sometimes settles around his youthful features when he believes himself unobserved. In examining the many faces of Link across his numerous incarnations, we begin to understand that his physical form serves as more than mere vessel for gameplay mechanics or artistic expression. Each variation reflects the specific needs of his era, the particular challenges that await his intervention. He becomes taller when strength is required, younger when innocence must prevail, more ethereal when magic dominates his world, more grounded when earthly concerns demand attention. Yet beneath these variations lies the constant truth of his essential nature, the hero who exists between worlds, who carries ancient wisdom in youthful form, who bears the weight of destiny with grace that makes even gods take notice. In his ever-changing yet eternally consistent appearance, we see reflected our own dreams of transformation, our hope that heroes walk among us still, wearing faces so ordinary that we might pass them on any street without recognition, yet carrying within their hearts the power to change everything. In the grand tapestry of heroic iconography, few garments carry as much symbolic weight as the green tunic that has adorned Link's shoulders across countless adventures. What appears to be simple woodland attire reveals itself upon closer examination as a uniform steeped in tradition, chance, and the peculiar alchemy that transforms practical necessity into legendary symbol. The story of Link's clothing begins not with grand design or divine mandate, but with the curious randomness of academic scheduling and the arbitrary nature of institutional color coordination. Deep within the lore of Skyward Sword lies a detail so mundane yet profound that it reshapes our understanding of destiny itself. Link's iconic green tunic originated not from prophetic vision or heroic birthright, but from the simple fact that he graduated from the Knight Academy in a year when green was designated as the graduating class color. The administrators of Skyloft's prestigious institution, in their bureaucratic wisdom, had established a rotating system of colors to distinguish each year's graduates, a practical solution to ceremonial organization that would inadvertently birth one of gaming's most enduring visual symbols. Had Link's natural aptitude developed merely 12 months earlier, had his training progressed at a slightly accelerated pace, had any number of minor variables shifted in his favor, the legendary hero would have donned yellow robes instead of green. The implications of this alternate timeline stagger the imagination. Would the hero of time have been known as the Golden Warrior? Would centuries of artistic depictions have portrayed him in sunny hues rather than forest tones? Would the very psychology of his character, so intimately connected with natural harmony and woodland stealth, have developed along entirely different lines? This accident of timing reveals something profound about the nature of tradition and legend. The most sacred symbols, the elements we consider essential to a character's identity, often emerge from circumstances far more random than we dare acknowledge. Yet once established, these arbitrary choices acquire the weight of destiny, becoming so fundamental to our understanding that we retroactively assign meaning to what was once mere coincidence. The green itself carries significance that transcends its accidental origin. Throughout human history, green has served as the color of life, growth, renewal, and the bridge between earth and sky. In medieval European symbolism, green represented hope and the triumph of life over death. Celtic traditions associated green with the otherworld, marking it as the hue worn by those who existed between mortal and divine realms. When Link dons his emerald garments, he claims kinship with Robin Hood's outlaws, with the Green Knight of Arthurian legend, with every forest guardian who has stood between civilization and chaos. Yet the practical aspects of Link's clothing reveal depths of consideration that belie its humble appearance. The tunic itself, crafted from materials that somehow remain pristine despite exposure to lava, ice, magical corruption, and the general wear of constant adventure, suggests fabrication techniques that transcend ordinary textile production. Scholars of Hyrulean material culture have long debated whether Link's garments possess inherent magical properties, or if they merely benefit from the protective aura that surrounds those chosen by destiny. The weight distribution of Link's outfit demonstrates remarkable engineering sophistication. His tunic and leggings allow for complete freedom of movement, while providing protection against environmental hazards that would challenge modern technical fabrics. The garments breathe in desert heat, yet retain warmth in frozen wastelands, repel moisture during underwater exploration, yet remain comfortable during extended physical exertion. Such versatility suggests either advanced magical enhancement or textile technology that puts contemporary outdoor gear to shame. The curious matter of Link's hat deserves particular attention, for it represents perhaps the most distinctive element of his ensemble. The long, pointed cap serves multiple functions beyond mere aesthetic appeal. It creates an unmistakable silhouette, recognizable even in shadow, provides protection from sun and rain, and establishes immediate visual connection to the folklore traditions that inspired the character's creation. Yet the hat's origins trace to an even more specific narrative element embedded deep within Hyrulean history. During the events chronicled in the Minish Cap, Link's companion Eslo, transformed into a sentient magical hat by the villain Vati, established a precedent that would echo through subsequent incarnations. Though Eslo himself was eventually restored to his original form, the image of Link crowned by a distinctive green cap became inseparable from heroic identity. Future Links would adopt similar headwear not through conscious imitation, but through the mysterious process by which heroic archetypes perpetuate themselves across reincarnations. The hat's practical benefits extend beyond protection and recognition. Its pointed shape creates natural channeling for rain and debris, while its length provides a degree of camouflage when Link moves through forested environments. The soft fabric allows for easy storage and quick deployment, while the distinctive color ensures that allies can identify him at distance, even when other details remain obscured. What appears to be mere fashion statement reveals itself as carefully considered survival equipment. The revolutionary departure represented by Breath of the Wild's blue tunic sent shockwaves through communities of longtime fans, challenging assumptions about heroic identity that had remained unquestioned for decades. This chromatic shift served multiple purposes beyond mere visual novelty. It signaled to players that familiar expectations would be subverted, that this incarnation of Link would forge his own path rather than follow predetermined heroic patterns. The blue connected him more closely to the ancient Sheikah technology that dominated his world, suggesting a hero more aligned with innovation than tradition. Yet even this radical departure acknowledged the power of green through the champion's tunic, an unlockable garment that restored Link's traditional coloration while maintaining the visual language of the new design aesthetic. Players who completed specific challenges could reclaim the classic appearance, but only after proving their dedication to the heroic path. This optional return to green carried deeper meaning than mere nostalgia. It suggested that true heroic identity transcends surface appearance, while acknowledging that symbols, once established, acquire power that demands respect. The regional variations in Link's clothing across different games reflect the practical demands of diverse environments and cultures. The layered garments of Twilight Princess speak to a hero who must traverse multiple climatic zones, while the streamlined outfit of Wind Waker suits a protagonist whose adventures occur primarily in maritime settings. Each adaptation maintains core visual elements while acknowledging local customs and environmental necessities. The armor sets that Link can acquire and wear throughout his adventures represent more than mere mechanical upgrades. They tell stories of cultural exchange, technological development, and the evolution of protective techniques across Hyrulean history. The silver mail of ancient knights, the specialized gear of the Gorons adapted for volcanic environments, the flowing robes favored by desert dwellers. Each piece carries within its construction the accumulated wisdom of the civilization that created it. The economic implications of Link's wardrobe raise questions that few dare address directly. The materials required for garments that provide both protection and comfort while maintaining their appearance across months of constant use would command premium prices in any realistic economy. The dyes necessary to maintain such vibrant colors, the threads capable of withstanding such abuse, the fasteners that never break or wear, these represent investments that should strain the resources of even wealthy adventurers. Yet Link rarely appears concerned with clothing maintenance or replacement, suggesting either remarkable durability in his garments or access to repair and replacement. Networks that operate beyond normal commercial channels. Perhaps the very nature of heroic calling provides protection, not just for the person, but for the symbols they carry, ensuring that the visual elements essential to their identity remain intact, regardless of practical challenges. The psychological impact of Link's distinctive appearance extends far beyond its practical benefits. The green tunic has become so associated with heroic identity that other characters in Hyrule recognize its significance immediately, often addressing Link with deference or expectation based solely on his attire. This creates a feedback loop where the clothing not only reflects heroic status, but actively reinforces it, shaping how both Link and those around him understand his role in the world. The weight of this symbolic burden cannot be understated. When Link dons the green tunic, he accepts not just a piece of clothing, but the accumulated expectations of everyone who has ever looked upon that color and seen hope. Children point and smile, adults bow their heads in respect, enemies recognize a threat that transcends individual capability. The tunic becomes both armor and target, protection and vulnerability, shield and bullseye. In examining the chronicles of Link's clothing, we discover that even the most seemingly arbitrary elements of heroic iconography carry profound significance once they become embedded in cultural consciousness. The green tunic that began as academic accident has evolved into something approaching religious significance, a visual shorthand for hope, courage, and the eternal possibility that ordinary individuals might rise to meet extraordinary challenges. The threads that comprise Link's legendary garments weave together more than fabric. They bind together the dreams and aspirations of countless individuals who have looked upon the green-clad hero and seen reflected their own potential for greatness. In this transformation of practical necessity into powerful symbol, we witness the alchemy by which legends are born and sustained, one stitch at a time. In the realm of nomenclature, where names carry the weight of destiny and identity shapes reality itself, few appellations achieve the elegant simplicity of Link. 4 letters that form a word so fundamental to human connection that its very utterance suggests binding, joining, bridging the gaps between separate worlds. Yet this seemingly obvious choice for a video game protagonist carries depths of meaning that extend far beyond its surface simplicity, weaving through linguistic traditions, philosophical concepts, and the peculiar alchemy by which fictional characters transcend their digital origins to become cultural touchstones. The decision to name Nintendo's green-clad hero Link emerged from Shigeru Miyamoto's vision of creating a character who would serve as the player's connection to the game world. In an era when most video game protagonists bore names that emphasized their power or prowess, names like Pit or Samus that suggested capability and strength, Miyamoto chose a word that spoke instead to relationship and interdependence. Link would not simply exist within his digital realm. He would serve as the bridge between the player's reality and the fantasy kingdom of Hyrule. This philosophical approach to character naming reflected a deeper understanding of how interactive entertainment differs from passive media. In books or films, protagonists can maintain distinct identities separate from their audience. In video games, the barrier between character and player must remain permeable to allow for meaningful engagement. By choosing Link, Miyamoto acknowledged that his hero would function not as a fully formed individual, but as a vessel through which players could experience heroic transformation. The linguistic implications of this choice extend across multiple languages and cultural contexts. In English, Link carries connotations of connection, chain, and binding, concepts that prove remarkably appropriate for a character whose adventures consistently involve joining together scattered elements to restore harmony. The word derives from Old English hlencan, meaning to connect or join, which itself traces back to Proto-Germanic roots that suggest binding and interweaving. These etymological foundations establish Link as a character whose very name prophesies his role as one who reunites what has been separated. Yet the name's significance deepens when examined through the lens of other linguistic traditions. In Germanic languages, similar-sounding words often relate to flexibility and grace, qualities essential to Link's ability to adapt to diverse challenges and environments. The Japanese pronunciation of Link creates phonetic associations with words suggesting cleverness and agility, characteristics that define the hero's approach to problem-solving and combat. This cross-linguistic resonance suggests either remarkable coincidence or careful consideration of how the name would function across different cultural contexts. The regional variations in Link's name across different versions of the games reveal fascinating insights into localization philosophy and cultural adaptation. While most regions maintain some version of the original Link, certain territories have experimented with alternatives that preserve the concept while adapting to local linguistic preferences. These variations often emphasize different aspects of the character's role, some highlighting his function as connector, others focusing on his nature as hero or champion. The most intriguing alternate naming conventions appear in early development materials and region-specific releases, where Link appears under different appellations entirely. These forgotten names, preserved now only in archives and the memories of dedicated researchers, offer glimpses into alternate timelines where the legendary hero might have carried entirely different cultural associations. Each name reflects the priorities and preferences of its creators, revealing how even fundamental character elements remain fluid until cultural consensus crystallizes around specific choices. The connection between Link's name and the Peter Pan inspiration that influenced his design creates layers of meaning that extend beyond surface similarities. Both characters serve as bridges between childhood and adulthood, between the mundane world and realms of magic and wonder. Both refuse the conventional progression toward mature responsibility, instead maintaining the flexibility and openness that allows them to access powers unavailable to those who have accepted adult limitations. The name Link emphasizes this bridging function while avoiding the specific cultural associations that might limit its universal appeal. The file naming systems in various Zelda games have created opportunities for players to explore alternate identities for their hero, leading to discoveries that range from charming to profound. When players enter specific names during character creation, they unlock hidden musical tracks, altered dialogue, or special animations that acknowledge their choices. These Easter eggs transform the naming process from mere customization into archaeological expedition, revealing secrets embedded by developers who understood that names carry power beyond their basic function. The phenomenon of players who choose to rename Link reflects deeper questions about character ownership and narrative agency. Some players maintain fierce loyalty to the canonical name, arguing that changing it disrupts the intended experience and breaks connection with established lore. Others embrace the opportunity to personalize their hero, creating versions of Link whose names reflect player identity, inside jokes, or cultural references that enhance their individual experience of the story. This tension between canonical identity and player agency reveals fundamental questions about the nature of interactive storytelling. When players rename Link, do they create an alternate version of the character, or do they simply apply different labels to the same essential hero? The game systems themselves seem uncertain, sometimes acknowledging player-chosen names in dialogue while maintaining visual and mechanical consistency with the established character model. The cultural impact of Link's name extends far beyond gaming communities into broader discussions of heroic identity and mythological archetype. Academic studies of modern folklore often cite Link as an example of how contemporary media creates new mythological figures using traditional narrative structures. His name, with its emphasis on connection rather than domination, reflects shifting cultural values that prioritize cooperation and understanding over conquest and control. The translation challenges presented by Link's name in languages that don't use Latin script reveal additional layers of complexity. Japanese katakana preserves the phonetic qualities while creating visual associations with indigenous writing systems. Chinese translations must balance phonetic similarity with character meanings that may or may not align with the intended concept. Arabic and Hebrew versions face additional challenges related to reading direction and consonant emphasis that can alter the name's feel entirely. These translation efforts highlight how names function as more than mere labels. They serve as cultural ambassadors that must navigate between linguistic systems while preserving essential character qualities. The success of Link's name across diverse markets suggests either careful consideration of these challenges during the original creation process or fortunate coincidence that allowed the name to adapt gracefully to different cultural contexts. The merchandising and licensing considerations around Link's name create practical challenges that rarely concern players, but significantly impact the character's commercial viability. Trademark protection for single-word character names presents unique difficulties, especially when those words already exist in common usage. The legal frameworks that protect Link as intellectual property must distinguish between the character and the general concept, creating boundaries that define authorized usage while avoiding restriction of ordinary language. The psychological research into character identification suggests that names play crucial roles in how players form emotional connections with their digital avatars. Names that emphasize relationship and connection, like Link, may facilitate deeper identification than those that emphasize distance or superiority. This psychological dimension adds weight to Miyamoto's naming choice, suggesting that the decision to call his hero Link contributed significantly to the character's enduring popularity and cultural impact. The evolution of Link's name. Recognition in popular culture demonstrates how fictional appellations can achieve cultural significance that rivals or exceeds that of historical figures. References to Link in contexts completely unrelated to gaming often assume audience familiarity with the character, indicating that the name has transcended its original medium to become part of general cultural literacy. This transformation from specific character designation to cultural reference point marks the achievement of true iconic status. The fan communities that have grown around the Zelda series often develop elaborate theories about the deeper significance of Link's name, connecting it to themes of fate, destiny, and the interconnectedness of all things within Hyrule's mythology. These interpretations, while not necessarily intended by the original creators, demonstrate how meaningful names can generate endless speculation and analysis that enriches the cultural ecosystem surrounding fictional characters. In examining the echoes and implications of Link's simple name, we discover that even the most basic elements of character creation carry profound potential for meaning and connection. The 4 letters that spell Link have become more than identification. They serve as invitation, promise, and bridge between the worlds of fantasy and reality. In choosing this name for his hero, Miyamoto created not just a character, but a concept. Not just a protagonist, but a principle that continues to resonate across cultures and generations, linking us all to the eternal dream of heroic transformation. In the pantheon of video game protagonists, few figures embody the paradox of communication quite like Link, whose legendary status rests not upon eloquent speeches or memorable catchphrases, but upon the profound expressiveness of silence itself. Here stands a hero whose voice exists in the spaces between words, whose deepest truths emerge through gesture, expression, and the subtle alchemy of physical presence. The silent protagonist represents more than mere design choice. It reflects a fundamental understanding of how interactive storytelling can transcend the limitations of traditional narrative while creating opportunities for connection that spoken dialogue might actually diminish. The evolution of Link's vocalization across the decades reveals fascinating insights into both technological advancement and philosophical approaches to character development. In the earliest adventures, technical limitations rendered true speech impossible, reducing all character communication to text boxes and simple sound effects. Yet, even as hardware capabilities expanded to accommodate full voice acting, the developers chose to maintain Link's essential silence, recognizing that what had begun as necessity had evolved into something far more meaningful, a deliberate artistic choice that enhanced rather than limited the character's expressive potential. The famous battle cry that has become synonymous with Link's combat encounters, that distinctive "Hi-ya" that punctuates sword swings and acrobatic maneuvers, represents perhaps the most carefully calibrated vocalization in gaming history. This single syllable carries the weight of determination, courage, and focused intent while avoiding the specificity that might limit player interpretation. The cry exists in that perfect liminal space between human expression and primal sound, allowing players to project their own emotional investment onto the character while maintaining the essential mystery that makes Link universally accessible. The technical evolution of this signature sound reveals remarkable attention to detail in its implementation. Early 8-bit versions conveyed the essential energy through synthesized approximations that nevertheless captured the spirit of heroic exertion. As audio technology advanced, the cry gained nuance and texture while maintaining its essential character. Each iteration preserved the core emotional impact while adapting to contemporary audio capabilities, creating a through line of consistent identity across dramatically different technological platforms. But Link's vocal expressions extend far beyond combat situations, encompassing a sophisticated vocabulary of grunts, sighs, and exclamations that communicate complex emotional states without resorting to verbal specificity. The soft grunt of effort when pushing heavy blocks conveys physical strain and determination. The sharp intake of breath when discovering hidden treasures communicates surprise and delight. The frustrated sigh when faced with seemingly impossible puzzles expresses the very human experience of intellectual challenge and temporary defeat. These non-verbal vocalizations create what scholars of interactive media have termed empathetic resonance, moments where players recognize their own emotional responses reflected in the character's sounds. The phenomenon transcends conscious analysis. Players instinctively understand Link's emotional state through audio cues that bypass rational interpretation and speak directly to shared human experience. This creates a form of communication more immediate and universal than words could provide. The sophistication of Link's body language reveals depths of character development that challenge assumptions about silent protagonists lacking personality or individual identity. His posture shifts subtly based on context, confident and alert when exploring familiar territory, cautious and tense when entering dangerous areas, relaxed and open when interacting with friendly characters. These physical adjustments occur without player input, suggesting an autonomous character consciousness that exists independent of direct control. The way Link holds his shield, sometimes casually at his side, sometimes raised defensively, sometimes positioned to catch maximum light for signaling, communicates tactical awareness and environmental assessment without requiring exposition or tutorial text. His sword grip adjusts based on opponent type and combat situation, demonstrating muscle memory and combat experience that transcends individual player skill. These details create the impression of a character who continues to exist and develop even during moments when players aren't actively directing his actions. Link's facial expressions represent masterworks of subtle animation that convey complex emotional states through minimal changes in feature positioning. The slight narrowing of eyes when focusing on distant targets, the barely perceptible smile when discovering something unexpected, the momentary tension around the mouth when making difficult decisions. These micro-expressions create emotional depth that rivals or exceeds that achieved through extensive dialogue trees in other games. The cultural phenomenon of players who claim to hear Link's voice in their minds while playing suggests that silence can actually enhance rather than limit character communication. Without predetermined vocal characteristics, players unconsciously assign Link vocal qualities that align with their personal preferences and cultural backgrounds. This psychological completion creates stronger identification than fixed voice acting might achieve, allowing Link to speak personally to each player in whatever mental voice feels most appropriate and engaging. The interaction patterns between Link and other characters reveal sophisticated choreography of non-verbal communication that often surpasses the depth achieved through traditional dialogue systems. When speaking with Princess Zelda, Link's posture subtly shifts to convey respect without subservience. When confronting enemies, his stance communicates threat assessment and tactical preparation. When interacting with children or vulnerable characters, his body language softens to project safety and protection. These adjustments happen automatically, suggesting character intelligence that operates beyond conscious player direction. The moments when Link does produce what might be considered speech, the occasional "come on," when calling Epona, or the rare exclamations during particularly intense sequences, carry extraordinary weight precisely because of their rarity. These verbal moments feel like gifts, special acknowledgments of circumstances so significant that they break through the character's usual reserve. They punctuate the silence rather than filling it, creating emphasis through contrast rather than overwhelming through volume. The psychological impact of Link's silence extends to how other characters relate to him within the game world. NPCs often remark on his quiet nature, interpreting his reticence in ways that reveal their own personalities and preoccupations. Some view his silence as wisdom, others as shyness, still others as mysterious depth. These varied interpretations create a complex social ecosystem where Link's character emerges through the responses he generates in others rather than through direct self-expression. The technical challenges of implementing effective silent protagonist mechanics require sophisticated audio design that compensates for the absence of traditional vocal cues. Environmental audio becomes more important when characters cannot verbally describe their surroundings. Musical themes must carry additional emotional weight when they cannot be supplemented by spoken commentary. Sound effects achieve greater significance when they serve as primary means of character expression. The entire audio landscape shifts to accommodate and enhance the power of meaningful silence. The influence of Link's silent protagonist model on subsequent game design demonstrates the profound impact of this communication approach on the broader medium. Numerous games have attempted to recreate the magic of expressive silence, with varying degrees of success. The failures often reveal how difficult it is to achieve Link's particular balance of personality and accessibility. Too much character-specific behavior eliminates player agency, while too little creates emptiness rather than meaningful void. The cultural interpretations of Link's silence reflect broader societal attitudes toward communication and leadership. In cultures that value contemplative wisdom, Link's reticence reads as profound depth. In societies that prioritize verbal eloquence, his silence might seem like limitation or missed opportunity. These varying responses highlight how character traits that seem universal actually interact with specific cultural values and expectations in complex ways. The fan communities that have developed around Link often engage in elaborate speculation about what his voice might sound like, creating detailed theories about accent, tone, and speech patterns based on subtle audio cues and contextual evidence. These discussions reveal the active engagement that silence can generate. Rather than passively receiving predetermined character information, players become co-creators, filling meaningful gaps with their own imagination and investment. The merchandising and media adaptations of Link face unique challenges, when translating a silent character to formats that depend heavily on vocal performance. Animated series and promotional materials must either assign voices that risk contradicting player assumptions or find creative ways to maintain the essential silence while still creating engaging content. These adaptation challenges highlight how integral the silence has become to Link's core identity. The therapeutic aspects of playing a silent protagonist like Link have received attention from researchers studying the psychological benefits of interactive entertainment. The absence of predetermined personality constraints allows players to project their own emotional needs onto the character, potentially creating opportunities for self-reflection and personal growth that more defined characters might not facilitate. Link becomes a vehicle for exploring personal heroic potential without the baggage of established character limitations. In examining the profound communicative power of Link's carefully crafted silence, we discover that the absence of words can speak more loudly than the most eloquent speeches. His wordless expressions transcend language barriers, cultural differences, and personal assumptions to create a form of universal communication that speaks directly to the human heart. In a medium often obsessed with technological advancement and increasing complexity, Link's enduring appeal reminds us that sometimes the most powerful messages are those that exist in the spaces between sounds, in the pregnant pauses where imagination can flourish and personal connection can take root and grow. In the realm of heroic impossibilities, few phenomena challenge our understanding of physical law quite like Link's legendary inventory management system, a feat of spatial engineering that transforms a seemingly ordinary young man into a walking arsenal capable of carrying enough equipment to outfit a small military expedition. Within the confines of what appears to be standard adventuring gear, Link somehow accommodates weapons, ranging from delicate fairy-blessed swords to massive two-handed claymores, tools that span from simple grappling hooks to complex mechanical contraptions, and supplies sufficient to sustain extended wilderness expeditions across multiple climatic zones. The physics-defying nature of Link's storage capacity becomes apparent when we consider the sheer volume and weight of items he routinely carries without any visible burden or movement restriction. A conservative estimate of his standard loadout includes multiple swords of varying lengths and compositions, several shields crafted from materials ranging from simple wood to mythical metals, a bow with sufficient arrows to supply a medieval siege, bombs whose explosive potential should require specialized handling, bottles containing various potions and captured creatures, musical instruments capable of magical manipulation, and countless smaller implements whose utility often proves crucial in unexpected situations. Yet Link moves with the fluid grace of an unencumbered acrobat, scaling walls and swimming through treacherous waters as if his pockets contained nothing more substantial than a few coins and a handkerchief. This contradiction between visible burden and observed performance suggests either revolutionary advances in miniaturization technology or the operation of magical principles that render conventional understanding of mass and volume irrelevant within the sphere of heroic necessity. The Master Sword itself represents perhaps the most fascinating element of Link's equipment relationship, existing in a state of quantum ownership that transcends normal concepts of possession and storage. This legendary blade appears and disappears from Link's inventory based on worthiness rather than physical acquisition, materializing when heroic need demands its presence and vanishing when such need passes. The sword serves not merely as weapon, but as authentication device, confirming Link's heroic status through its willingness to manifest in his grasp. The metaphysical bond between Link and the Master Sword extends beyond simple wielder-weapon dynamics into realms of spiritual symbiosis that challenge materialistic interpretations of equipment functionality. The sword's power fluctuates based on Link's moral state and spiritual development, growing stronger as he demonstrates courage, wisdom, and compassion, while potentially weakening if he strays from heroic principles. This responsive relationship suggests that legendary weapons possess consciousness and agency that allows them to participate actively in heroic narratives rather than serving as passive tools. The various shields that Link employs throughout his adventures demonstrate remarkable adaptation to diverse combat scenarios and environmental challenges. The simple wooden shields of his early adventures provide basic protection while maintaining the lightweight portability essential for extended travel. The Hylian shield's legendary durability stems from metallurgical techniques that somehow produce materials capable of withstanding direct dragon fire, explosive magical attacks, and the grinding erosion of decades of constant use without showing significant wear or degradation. The mirror shield's ability to reflect magical attacks and redirect energy-based assaults suggests integration of optical principles with protective enchantments that operate according to rules more mystical than scientific. Yet Link wields these technologically advanced defensive implements with intuitive mastery that indicates either extensive prior training or the activation of inherited muscle memory that transcends individual learning experience. The bow and arrow combination represents perhaps the most traditional element of Link's arsenal, yet even this conventional weapon system operates according to enhanced parameters that exceed normal archival performance. Link's arrows travel with impossible accuracy across distances that should challenge even master archers using modern equipment, while his quiver somehow maintains an endless supply despite the absence of visible restocking opportunities during extended wilderness expeditions. The specialized arrow types that Link employs, fire arrows that ignite upon impact, ice arrows that freeze targets solid, light arrows that purify corruption and vanquish shadow, indicate access to alchemical or magical enhancement techniques that transform simple projectiles into specialized tools for confronting supernatural threats. The seamless switching between arrow types during combat suggests an inventory organization system that operates faster than conscious thought, allowing tactical adaptation at speeds that exceed normal human reaction time. The bomb-carrying capacity that Link demonstrates raises profound questions about safety protocols and storage methodology that conventional military science would consider essential for handling explosive materials. Link routinely carries dozens of active explosive devices while engaging in activities that involve rolling, jumping, swimming, and direct physical combat, circumstances that should trigger immediate detonation under normal explosive handling principles. Yet his bombs remain stable until deliberately activated, suggesting either revolutionary advances in explosive chemistry or magical stabilization that prevents accidental triggering. The precision with which Link deploys these explosives indicates understanding of blast radius, timing, and tactical application that would challenge experienced demolitions experts. He can calculate precise placement to open blocked passages without causing structural collapse, time detonations to coincide with enemy movement patterns, and chain explosive sequences to achieve complex environmental modifications. This expertise appears to manifest spontaneously, rather than through extended training, suggesting another facet of the heroic knowledge inheritance that allows each Link incarnation to access skills developed by previous heroes. The collection of bottles that Link maintains throughout his adventures serves multiple functions that extend far beyond simple liquid storage. These seemingly mundane containers house captured fairies, whose healing properties provide emergency medical support, contain specialized potions, whose effects range from enhanced combat ability to environmental protection, and preserve various substances, whose utility often proves crucial in unexpected circumstances. The biological implications of Link's fairy-containing methodology raise fascinating questions about the relationship between these helpful creatures and their temporary imprisonment within glass containers. The fairies appear to enter these vessels willingly and maintain their magical properties indefinitely without apparent distress or degradation. This suggests either a symbiotic relationship that benefits both parties or magical properties inherent in the bottles themselves that create environments suitable for fairy preservation. The musical instruments that Link masters represent perhaps the most sophisticated element of his equipment collection, requiring not only physical storage, but the maintenance of proper tuning and environmental protection necessary for delicate mechanisms. The ocarina, harp, and various other instruments must remain functional, despite exposure to extremes of temperature, humidity, and physical stress that would destroy conventional musical equipment. Yet the magical properties of these instruments transcend their function as mere musical devices, serving as keys to unlock temporal manipulation, weather control, and interdimensional transportation. The precise melodies required to activate these effects demand perfect pitch and timing that would challenge professional musicians, yet Link demonstrates mastery that appears to emerge from spiritual connection rather than extensive practice. The hook-shot and claw-shot devices represent technological marvels that combine precision engineering with supernatural enhancement to create tools capable of supporting Link's full body weight across impossible distances while maintaining accuracy sufficient to target specific anchor points during high-speed movement. The mechanisms required to generate sufficient force for these operations while maintaining portability should require power sources and control systems far beyond the apparent complexity of the devices themselves. The grappling and swinging capabilities that these tools provide allow Link to traverse environments in ways that fundamentally alter level design possibilities and combat tactics. The immediate deployment speed and automatic retraction suggest control systems that respond to user intention rather than manual operation, creating seamless integration between tool and wielder that approaches telepathic coordination. The boots and other specialized footwear that Link acquires throughout his adventures demonstrate remarkable adaptation to environmental challenges that would normally require extensive specialized equipment. The iron boots that allow underwater walking without impeding surface mobility, the hover boots that provide temporary flight capability, the Pegasus boots that enhance speed beyond normal human limits. Each pair solves specific traversal challenges while maintaining compatibility with Link's standard equipment loadout. The power sources that drive these enhanced capabilities remain mysterious, operating without visible fuel requirements or maintenance needs, despite the energy expenditure that their functions should demand. The seamless switching between different boot types during active adventuring suggests either incredibly efficient quick change mechanisms or magical transformation that alters the fundamental properties of Link's footwear based on immediate need. The economic implications of Link's equipment acquisition and maintenance raise questions about the financial systems that support heroic adventuring in Hyrule. The specialized materials required for legendary weapons and magical tools should command premium prices that exceed the resources available to most individuals. Yet Link somehow gains access to these items through mechanisms that operate outside normal commercial channels. The durability and self-maintenance properties of Link's equipment suggest either revolutionary advances in materials science or magical enhancement that provides indefinite service life without degradation. Weapons maintain their sharpness despite constant use. Armor retains protective properties. Despite exposure to corrosive substances, tools continue functioning. Despite environmental stresses that should cause mechanical failure. The crafting and upgrade systems that allow Link to enhance his equipment reveal sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, enchantment, and material science that enables systematic improvement of tool performance through carefully applied modifications. The precise combination of materials and techniques required for these enhancements suggests access to knowledge repositories that preserve ancient crafting wisdom while accommodating technological innovation. In examining the impossible inventory and equipment mastery that defines Link's adventuring capability, we encounter phenomena that challenge conventional understanding of physical law while revealing deeper truths about the nature of heroic necessity. Perhaps the true magic lies not in the tools themselves, but in the transformation that occurs when ordinary objects encounter extraordinary purpose, when simple implements become extensions of heroic will, and when the impossible becomes inevitable through the alchemy of courage applied to craft. In the vast constellation of relationships that define heroic narrative, Link exists as a peculiar gravitational center, a figure whose connections to others reveal as much about the nature of heroism as they do about the individuals who orbit his legendary presence. Unlike traditional protagonists who accumulate allies through charisma or political maneuvering, Link attracts companions and forms bonds through a more mysterious process that seems to operate according to principles of spiritual resonance rather than conventional social dynamics. These relationships, spanning multiple incarnations and countless adventures, create a web of connection that transcends individual timelines to suggest deeper patterns of affinity and purpose. The relationship between Link and Princess Zelda represents perhaps the most complex and enduring connection in all of interactive entertainment, a bond that operates simultaneously on multiple levels of meaning while defying simple categorization. Across numerous incarnations, these two figures find themselves drawn together by forces that extend far beyond political necessity or romantic attraction, creating a partnership that serves purposes both earthly and cosmic. Their connection persists despite the fact that most versions of Link and Zelda encounter each other as strangers, suggesting that recognition operates on levels deeper than conscious memory or individual identity. The spiritual dimension of the Link-Zelda relationship becomes apparent when we consider how consistently they complement each other's abilities and perspectives. Where Link embodies courage and direct action, Zelda represents wisdom and strategic thinking. Where Link operates through physical prowess and intuitive problem-solving, Zelda channels magical knowledge and political understanding. Their partnership creates a synthesis that proves greater than the sum of its parts, allowing them to confront challenges that neither could overcome alone. This complementarity suggests either remarkable coincidence or the operation of deeper harmonies that guide heroic relationships across time and space. Yet the tragedy embedded within this connection cannot be ignored. The fact that their partnership, however profound, exists primarily during periods of crisis and dissolution. Link and Zelda rarely enjoy extended periods of peaceful coexistence. Their bonds strengthen in response to external threats that demand their combined intervention. When peace returns to Hyrule, their paths typically diverge, leaving both figures to carry the memory of profound connection that circumstances prevent them from exploring or developing under normal conditions. The fairy companions who accompany Link throughout various adventures represent an entirely different category of relationship, one that transcends the boundaries between species to create partnerships based on mutual service and understanding. These diminutive allies provide more than mere guidance or tactical support. They serve as emotional anchors that prevent Link from becoming isolated by the weight of his heroic responsibilities. The chiming voices of Navi, Tatl, and their counterparts offer commentary, encouragement, and sometimes gentle correction that keeps Link connected to perspectives beyond his own immediate concerns. The psychological function of fairy companionship becomes particularly significant when we consider Link's essential silence and the social isolation that his heroic calling often demands. The fairies serve as external voices for internal dialogue, articulating concerns and observations that Link cannot express directly while maintaining the essential mystery of his character. They translate his non-verbal communications for other characters while providing players with guidance that emerges naturally from the narrative rather than through intrusive interface elements. The bond between Link and Epona represents one of the most emotionally resonant partnerships in the entire series, demonstrating how heroic relationships can transcend the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. Their connection begins in childhood innocence and develops into a partnership of profound trust and mutual understanding that enables achievements impossible for either individual alone. Epona responds to Link's unspoken signals with precision that suggests telepathic communication, while Link demonstrates riding skills that border on supernatural fusion between rider and mount. The cultural significance of the Link-Epona relationship extends deep into mythological traditions that associate heroic figures with extraordinary animal companions. From Alexander and Bucephalus to the Lone Ranger and Silver, legendary partnerships between heroes and horses represent ideals of loyalty, freedom, and the harmony between civilization and wildness. Link and Epona embody these archetypal qualities, while adding dimensions of emotional depth that emerge through interactive experience rather than passive observation. The mentor figures who guide Link throughout his adventures, from the Deku Tree's ancient wisdom to King of Red Lion's transformed guidance, represent relationships that operate according to principles of spiritual inheritance rather than conventional education. These teachers provide more than mere instruction. They serve as bridges connecting Link to knowledge and understanding that transcends individual learning experience. Their guidance often emerges at precisely the moments when Link's own resources prove insufficient, suggesting either remarkable timing or supernatural awareness of heroic necessity. The temporary nature of most mentor relationships in Link's experience reflects deeper truths about the heroic journey and the isolation that ultimately defines legendary status. True heroes must eventually transcend dependence on external guidance to discover wisdom that emerges from within their own experience and character. The mentors withdraw not because their work is complete, but because continued dependence would prevent Link from achieving the independence essential to genuine heroic development. The romantic implications that hover around various Link relationships create fascinating tensions between player agency and narrative development. Different games suggest different possibilities. Some hint at deep affection between Link and Zelda. Others explore connections with companions like Midna or Saria. Still others leave such matters entirely to player interpretation. This ambiguity serves multiple functions, allowing players to project their own romantic preferences onto the character while avoiding commitments that might conflict with the essential accessibility that makes Link universally appealing. The complexity of romantic interpretation in Link's relationships reflects broader questions about the nature of heroic love and whether legendary figures can maintain the personal connections that define ordinary human experience. The very qualities that make Link heroic, his dedication to others above himself, his willingness to sacrifice personal desires for greater good, his acceptance of responsibilities that transcend individual fulfillment, may inherently conflict with the intimacy and mutual focus that romantic relationships require. The friendships that Link forms with recurring characters like Saria, Darunia, and Ruto demonstrate how heroic relationships can persist across vast differences in species, culture, and worldview. These bonds often begin in childhood innocence and evolve to accommodate the growing weight of heroic responsibility while maintaining essential cores of affection and mutual respect. The friends who remember Link from before his heroic calling provide crucial connections to identity elements that might otherwise be lost amid legendary transformation. The intergenerational aspects of Link's relationships become particularly poignant when we consider how his extended adventures often span years or decades that alter the lives of those who know him. Friends age while Link remains suspended in heroic timelessness, creating relationships that must constantly adapt to changing circumstances and evolving needs. The emotional weight of watching others grow old while remaining essentially unchanged adds layers of melancholy to even the most joyful reunions. The enemy relationships that define much of Link's experience represent a darker aspect of heroic connection, bonds forged through conflict that often carry their own forms of respect and understanding. Recurring antagonists like Ganondorf engage with Link in cycles of confrontation that span multiple incarnations, creating adversarial relationships that achieve their own forms of intimacy through repeated encounter. These enemy bonds suggest that heroism requires not just the capacity for love and friendship, but the ability to understand and engage with opposition in ways that transcend simple hatred or rejection. The transformative effect that Link has on those around him reveals perhaps the most significant aspect of his relational nature: the capacity to inspire growth and positive change in others through example rather than exhortation. Characters who encounter Link often discover courage they didn't know they possessed, wisdom they hadn't previously accessed, or compassion they hadn't thought to express. His presence catalyzes development in others while remaining essentially stable himself, serving as a fixed point around which positive transformation can occur. The loneliness that underlies much of Link's relational experience cannot be ignored, despite the richness of connections he forms throughout his adventures. The very nature of heroic calling creates isolation that even the deepest friendships cannot entirely bridge. Link carries knowledge of dangers and responsibilities that others cannot fully comprehend, experiences trauma and wonder that resist adequate communication, and bears weight that cannot be shared without destroying the innocence that makes sharing worthwhile. Yet this solitude serves essential functions within the heroic narrative, creating space for the self-reliance and inner development that enable Link to function effectively when external support proves unavailable. The loneliness becomes not merely burden, but tool, forging strength and wisdom that emerge only through direct encounter with isolation and uncertainty. The pattern of separation and reunion that characterizes most of Link's important relationships reflects deeper rhythms of heroic existence. The necessity of moving between connection and solitude, between community engagement and individual challenge, between the comfort of familiar bonds and the growth that emerges from venturing into unknown territory. These cycles of relationship create emotional frameworks that sustain both Link and those who care for him through extended periods of separation and uncertainty. In examining the complex web of relationships that define Link's emotional landscape, we discover that even the most legendary heroes require connection to others for psychological survival and moral development. Yet the very qualities that make such heroes necessary also create barriers to conventional relationship patterns, demanding new forms of connection that can accommodate the unique demands of heroic calling while preserving the essential humanity that makes heroism meaningful and worthwhile. In the deepest chambers of the Water Temple, where light filters through ancient stone and shadows dance with malevolent purpose, there exists a confrontation that transcends ordinary combat to become something approaching philosophical dialogue conducted through blade and movement. Here, in the place where reflections hold more truth than substance, Link first encountered the dark mirror of his own heroic nature, a figure that would haunt subsequent adventures not through recurring appearance, but through the profound questions its existence raises about identity, morality, and the price of heroic calling. Dark Link emerged from the shadowed waters of Adventure of Link as more than mere boss encounter or gameplay mechanic. This obsidian reflection represented the materialization of psychological concepts that storytellers had explored for centuries, given digital form and interactive purpose that transformed abstract fear into tangible opponent. The encounter defied conventional video game logic. Here was an enemy that possessed identical abilities, matching equipment, and seemingly perfect knowledge of the player's preferred combat techniques, creating battles that functioned as much as self-examination as conquest. The visual design of Dark Link achieved remarkable impact through elegant simplicity, that proved more unsettling than elaborate monster creation could provide. By inverting Link's familiar, green and flesh tones into blacks and shadows, while maintaining identical proportions and movement patterns, the developers created an opponent that registered as both completely foreign and unnervingly familiar. Players confronting Dark Link experience the unique discomfort of fighting themselves, watching their own heroic silhouette turned against them with malicious intent. The psychological implications of this dark reflection extend far beyond gaming into realms of depth psychology and mythological analysis that have captivated human consciousness since storytelling began. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self, those aspects of personality that consciousness rejects or fails to acknowledge, finds perfect expression in Dark Link's emergence from waters that have always symbolized the unconscious mind. The hero's journey requires not just external conquest, but internal integration, acknowledgement of darkness that exists within even the most noble intentions. The Peter Pan connection that inspired Link's original creation gains additional depth through Dark Link's existence, echoing the famous shadow separation that occurs in J.M. Barrie's tale. Peter's detached shadow becomes a source of trouble and confusion until properly reintegrated, suggesting that wholeness requires acceptance of all aspects of self rather than rejection of uncomfortable truths. Dark Link represents the heroic shadow that must be confronted rather than denied, integrated rather than destroyed, understood rather than simply conquered. The combat mechanics surrounding Dark Link encounters reveal sophisticated understanding of how interactive media can explore psychological themes through gameplay rather than exposition. Traditional enemies telegraph their attacks through distinct animations and follow predictable patterns that allow players to develop countermeasures through observation and practice. Dark Link mirrors player behavior, learning and adapting in real time to create encounters that resist simple strategic solutions. Victory requires not just technical skill, but fundamental reconsideration of approach, forcing players to examine their own combat preferences and unconscious assumptions. The most disturbing aspect of fighting. Dark Link lies not in its difficulty, but in its familiarity. The recognition that every aggressive move, every defensive stance, every tactical decision reflects choices that players themselves have made throughout their heroic journey. The dark reflection forces uncomfortable awareness of how thin the line between heroic action and violent aggression might actually be, how easily noble intention can transform into destructive compulsion when filtered through different moral frameworks. The recurring nature of Dark Link across multiple titles suggests that this confrontation represents more than single narrative moment or isolated boss encounter. Each appearance adapts to contemporary game design while maintaining essential elements that preserve the psychological impact of facing one's own reflection turned hostile. From the pixelated shadows of early adventures to the sophisticated animations of modern incarnations, Dark Link evolves while retaining the capacity to unsettle players through recognition rather than alienation. The various strategies that players develop for confronting Dark Link reveal fascinating insights into how individuals respond to self-confrontation when filtered through interactive media. Some players approach the battle with aggressive tactics, attempting to overwhelm their reflection through speed and power that prevent adaptation. Others adopt defensive approaches that emphasize patience and counterattack, allowing Dark Link to reveal its patterns before responding with calculated precision. Still others discover that unconventional tactics, refusing to engage directly, using environmental hazards, or exploiting unexpected behavioral quirks, provide pathways to victory that bypass direct confrontation entirely. These varied approaches to Dark Link combat often mirror players' preferred methods for handling psychological conflict in their own lives. The aggressive players who rush forward with overwhelming force might favor direct confrontation of personal problems, while defensive players might prefer careful observation and measured response. Those who discover unconventional solutions often demonstrate similar creative problem-solving in facing real-world challenges, suggesting that gameplay choices reflect deeper personality patterns that extend beyond digital entertainment. The symbolism embedded within Dark Link encounters operates on multiple levels that reward both casual engagement and deep analysis. On the surface level, the battles represent classic hero versus shadow narratives that have structured countless myths and stories throughout human history. The intermediate level explores themes of self-knowledge and personal growth that resonate with anyone who has struggled to understand their own motivations and impulses. The deepest level confronts questions about the nature of good and evil that challenge comfortable assumptions about moral clarity and heroic certainty. The environmental contexts where Dark Link encounters typically occur, places of reflection, shadow, and ambiguous light, reinforce the psychological themes while creating atmospheric support for the internal drama being enacted through combat. Water temples with their distorting mirrors, shadow realms where reality becomes questionable, liminal spaces between light and darkness. These settings externalize the internal landscape where shadow integration must occur, making psychological metaphor into navigable geography. The relationship between Link and his dark reflection evolves throughout their various encounters, suggesting development in the hero's capacity for self-understanding and acceptance. Early encounters often emphasize the alien nature of the shadow, treating Dark Link as purely antagonistic force to be overcome through superior skill or determination. Later appearances sometimes introduce elements of tragedy or loss, suggesting that the dark reflection represents not inherent evil, but misdirected potential or corrupted idealism that deserves understanding rather than simple destruction. The player psychology research that has emerged around Dark Link encounters reveals fascinating data about how interactive media can facilitate genuine self-reflection and personal growth. Players report feeling genuinely unsettled by the experience of fighting themselves, often describing moments of recognition that extend beyond game mechanics into personal insight. Some describe the battles as therapeutic confrontations with their own aggressive impulses, while others report increased awareness of their tactical preferences and decision-making patterns. The cultural interpretations of Dark Link vary significantly across different regions and demographics, reflecting diverse approaches to shadow psychology and self-confrontation that characterize various philosophical and religious traditions. Western players often interpret the encounters through Jungian psychological frameworks that emphasize integration and balance, while Eastern players might draw upon concepts of yin and yang that stress complementary rather than oppositional relationships between light and dark aspects of personality. The technical challenges involved in creating convincing Dark Link encounters reveal the sophisticated programming required to produce genuinely adaptive enemy behavior that feels both familiar and threatening. The artificial intelligence must analyze player patterns quickly enough to provide responsive opposition, while maintaining enough unpredictability to prevent simple exploitation. The visual design must achieve immediate recognition while creating sufficient differentiation to avoid confusion during combat. The audio design must convey menace without losing the essential character elements that make the opponent recognizably Link-derived. The lasting impact of Dark Link on video game design extends far beyond the Zelda series into broader discussions of how interactive media can explore complex psychological themes through gameplay mechanics rather than narrative exposition. The success of the concept has inspired numerous imitators and variations, yet few achieve the particular combination of familiarity and alienation that makes the original encounters so memorably unsettling. The philosophical questions raised by Dark Link's existence continue to resonate long after specific encounters conclude, challenging players to consider what aspects of their own personalities they might prefer to ignore or deny. The dark reflection serves as a reminder that heroism requires honest self-assessment and integration of all aspects of personality, rather than simple cultivation of noble qualities, while rejecting uncomfortable truths about human nature. In confronting the shadow that mirrors his own heroic form, Link engages in the most essential battle of the heroic journey, the struggle not against external evil, but against the darkness that exists within even the most noble intentions. Through this confrontation, he achieves not just victory, but wisdom, not just conquest, but integration, not just triumph, but the profound self-knowledge that transforms simple courage into genuine heroism worthy of legend and memory. In the vast catalog of heroic achievements and legendary deeds that comprise Link's documented adventures, perhaps the most revealing details emerge not from his epic confrontations with ancient evils or his mastery of mystical artifacts, but from the peculiar collection of behavioral quirks, unintended consequences, and amusing contradictions that accumulate around the edges of his mythic status. These seemingly insignificant details, the way he interacts with domestic poultry, his relationship with fragile pottery, his curious swimming limitations despite aquatic proficiency, create a portrait of heroism that encompasses both the sublime and the ridiculous, revealing that even legendary figures remain subject to the small absurdities that define mortal existence. The phenomenon that has become known among scholars of Hyrulean behavior as the chicken incident represents perhaps the most universally recognized example of how Link's heroic nature intersects with the mundane realities of rural life in ways that produce consequences both swift and memorable. Across multiple incarnations and various kingdoms, Link demonstrates a consistent tendency to engage with domestic fowl in manners that suggest either profound misunderstanding of their social dynamics or deliberate provocation of creatures whose collective response proves disproportionate to any reasonable threat assessment. The Kuko attacks that inevitably follow Link's aggressive interactions with these seemingly harmless farm animals have achieved legendary status among those who witness or experience them, transforming simple poultry into instruments of swift and decisive justice that operate according to principles more mystical than ornithological. The coordinated nature of these retaliatory strikes suggests communication networks and organizational capabilities that exceed those documented in conventional studies of domestic bird behavior, raising questions about whether cuckoos possess intelligence and social structures that scholars have systematically underestimated. The symbolic implications of Link's troubled relationship with chickens extend deep into folkloric traditions that associate domestic birds with maternal protection, territorial defense, and the fierce loyalty that can transform apparently helpless creatures into formidable opponents when circumstances demand. The cuckoo encounters serve as humbling reminders that heroic status provides no exemption from the consequences of thoughtless aggression, that even legendary warriors must respect the dignity and territorial claims of creatures they might consider beneath notice. The pottery destruction that follows in Link's wake throughout his various adventures has achieved such consistency that it might be considered a defining characteristic of his presence in any given location. The systematic shattering of ceramic vessels, from simple storage jars to elaborate decorative urns, occurs with such frequency and thoroughness that it suggests either profound clumsiness or deliberate policy of archaeological disruption that prioritizes immediate resource acquisition over cultural preservation concerns. The economic implications of Link's destructive relationship with ceramics raise fascinating questions about the financial systems that support his adventures and the insurance mechanisms that might protect property owners from heroic intervention. The replacement cost for the countless vessels destroyed during typical dungeon exploration should exceed the resources available to most individual adventurers. Yet Link rarely appears concerned with compensating those whose property suffers damage during his passage through their territories. The psychological profile that emerges from Link's compulsive pottery destruction suggests either deeply ingrained survival instincts that prioritize resource gathering over social courtesy, or unconscious expressions of frustration and aggression that find outlet through socially acceptable targets. The systematic nature of the destruction, the way Link approaches each vessel with apparent intent rather than accidental contact, indicates conscious choice rather than mere collateral damage from combat encounters. The swimming paradox that characterizes Link's relationship with water presents one of the most puzzling contradictions in his documented capabilities, revealing limitations that seem to operate according to arbitrary rather than logical principles. Despite demonstrating aquatic proficiency that includes underwater exploration, combat with marine creatures, and navigation through complex submerged environments, Link consistently displays vulnerability to deep water that defies rational explanation based on his demonstrated skills and physical capabilities. The depth threshold below which Link's swimming abilities mysteriously fail appears to operate according to rules more magical than physical, suggesting that his aquatic limitations stem from psychological or spiritual factors rather than simple lack of training or physical conditioning. The sudden transition from confident underwater navigation to helpless drowning occurs with such abruptness that it implies the operation of curse or geas, rather than gradual exhaustion or skill degradation. The cultural significance of Link's swimming limitations resonates with mythological traditions that associate water with spiritual purification, transformation, and the boundaries between conscious and unconscious realms. Heroes in folklore often encounter water as threshold that must be crossed through spiritual rather than physical means, suggesting that Link's aquatic vulnerabilities reflect deeper truths about the nature of heroic development and the challenges that cannot be overcome through conventional skill or determination alone. The sleep patterns that govern Link's rest requirements reveal additional quirks that distinguish heroic physiology from ordinary human needs while creating amusing contradictions between legendary endurance and practical limitations. Link demonstrates capability for extended periods of continuous activity that should exhaust normal individuals, yet displays particular vulnerability to sudden onset fatigue that can render him unconscious at moments that seem tactically inadvisable. The bed preference behaviors that emerge during Link's various adventures suggest either highly developed standards for sleeping comfort or unconscious recognition of locations that provide optimal rest benefits through mechanisms that operate beyond simple physical convenience. His tendency to test sleeping accommodations in inappropriate locations, including beds belonging to strangers, outdoor furniture not designed for extended use, and makeshift arrangements in dangerous environments, indicates either remarkable confidence in his personal safety or significant naivety about social conventions regarding private property. The restorative properties of sleep in Link's experience appear to operate according to enhanced parameters that exceed normal human recovery capabilities, allowing him to heal from injuries, restore magical energy, and refresh mental acuity. Through rest periods that would provide only minimal benefit to ordinary individuals, this accelerated recovery suggests either superhuman physiology or magical enhancement that optimizes the relationship between rest and restoration in ways that support extended heroic activity. The dietary habits that sustain Link throughout his adventures reveal eating patterns that combine practical necessity with apparent personal preference in ways that create both efficient nutrition and occasional amusing excess. His documented consumption of found food items, including ingredients discovered in wilderness locations, provisions stored in ancient containers, and meals prepared by strangers with questionable culinary skills, suggests either remarkable digestive resilience or magical protection against food-borne illness that would challenge ordinary travelers. The quantity of food that Link can consume during single sitting appears to exceed normal human capacity by margins that suggest either enhanced metabolic requirements or storage capabilities that operate according to principles similar to his equipment management systems. His ability to consume multiple full meals in rapid succession without apparent discomfort indicates digestive efficiency that supports the high energy demands of continuous adventuring while maintaining optimal performance across diverse physical and magical challenges. The social implications of Link's eating behaviors, particularly his tendency to consume food belonging to others without explicit permission or compensation, reveal either remarkable confidence in universal hospitality traditions or significant gaps in his understanding of property rights and social courtesy. The tolerance that most individuals display toward his uninvited consumption suggests either recognition of his heroic status or resignation to the inevitability of heroic requisition during times of crisis. The time travel implications that emerge from Link's various temporal adventures create logical paradoxes that affect personal continuity in ways that should challenge individual identity, but somehow fail to produce the psychological disruption that such experiences would typically generate. His ability to maintain coherent sense of self despite experiencing multiple timelines, alternate histories, and causal loops suggests either remarkable mental flexibility or protection from temporal displacement effects that operate beyond normal human psychological mechanisms. The memory retention patterns that Link displays across different temporal contexts reveal selective preservation of information that appears to prioritize emotional significance over chronological accuracy or practical utility. His ability to remember crucial details about relationships and personal connections, while sometimes forgetting technical information or strategic insights, suggests that heroic memory operates according to principles that emphasize human connection over abstract knowledge. The aging dynamics that affect Link during extended adventures present fascinating contradictions between physical development and experiential accumulation that create apparent mismatches between appearance and capability. His maintenance of youthful appearance despite experiences that should produce visible aging effects, indicates either supernatural preservation or time dilation effects that protect him from the normal relationship between experience and physical deterioration. The glitch behaviors that occasionally manifest in Link's documented activities, moments when he appears to violate physical laws or game mechanics in ways that seem unintentional, have been interpreted by some scholars as evidence of reality breakdown or magical interference that affects the fundamental rules governing heroic existence. These anomalous events often provide unexpected advantages or amusing outcomes that suggest benevolent forces working to support heroic success through means that transcend normal causality. The braking mechanics that govern Link's interaction with environmental obstacles reveal strength capabilities that fluctuate according to situational need rather than consistent physical limitation, allowing him to shatter barriers that should require specialized tools while sometimes struggling with obstacles that should yield to ordinary effort. This variable capability suggests that heroic strength operates according to narrative necessity rather than biomechanical consistency. In examining these quirks, glitches, and unintended behaviors that accumulate around Link's legendary status, we discover that even the most mythic figures remain grounded in the small absurdities and practical contradictions that make existence both meaningful and amusing. These details humanize the legend while adding layers of complexity that transform simple, heroic archetype into fully realized character whose greatness encompasses both sublime achievement and endearing fallibility. In the deepest chambers of Hyrule's mythological architecture, where time moves according to rules that transcend linear progression and destiny weaves patterns that span millennia, there exists a truth so profound and terrible that even the gods themselves tremble at its implications. Link, the hero whose green garb has become synonymous with hope and salvation, exists not as individual, but as eternal prisoner, bound by cosmic forces to an endless cycle of reincarnation that transforms heroic calling from blessing into curse of the most exquisite and terrible design. The curse that binds Link to eternal return operates according to principles that reveal the darker aspects of divine justice and cosmic balance, where the very qualities that make heroism possible become the chains that prevent escape from heroic obligation. Each incarnation of Link emerges into consciousness, already marked by destiny, carrying within his soul the accumulated weight of countless previous lives, while remaining consciously unaware of the full scope of his eternal burden. This ignorance serves as both mercy and cruelty, protection from the despair that total knowledge might bring, yet ensuring that each Link must rediscover his purpose through struggle and sacrifice, rather than inherited wisdom. The metaphysical mechanics of heroic reincarnation transcend simple concepts of death and rebirth to encompass complex spiritual processes that preserve essential heroic qualities while allowing for individual variation and growth. Each Link retains core characteristics: courage, compassion, determination, the innate ability to inspire others and master mystical artifacts, yet develops unique personalities and capabilities that reflect the specific challenges of his era. This balance between continuity and change suggests divine engineering of remarkable sophistication, creating a system that maintains heroic effectiveness while preventing the stagnation that might result from identical repetition. The timeline consciousness that Link occasionally displays reveals disturbing glimpses of awareness that penetrate the veil of reincarnation amnesia, suggesting that beneath the surface of individual identity lies a deeper self that remembers everything. These moments of recognition, when Link demonstrates inexplicable familiarity with ancient songs, instinctive knowledge of forgotten techniques, or emotional responses to places and people he has never consciously encountered, hint at the presence of a cosmic memory that transcends individual incarnation while remaining largely inaccessible to ordinary consciousness. The psychological implications of carrying such buried knowledge create internal tensions that manifest in Link's characteristic silence and introspective nature. The weight of accumulated experience, even when consciously inaccessible, shapes personality in ways that set him apart from ordinary individuals while creating isolation that cannot be fully bridged through conventional relationship. Link's silence may serve not just as narrative device, but as psychological necessity, protection against the overwhelming nature of truths too vast for individual consciousness to process without fragmenting under their weight. The burden of eternal heroic responsibility extends beyond personal sacrifice to encompass the knowledge that his success in any given incarnation merely ensures the continuation of the cycle rather than providing final resolution to cosmic conflict. Each victory over darkness, each restoration of peace and balance, each saving of the world creates conditions that will inevitably decay and require future intervention. Link exists in a state of eternal Sisyphean struggle where triumph contains the seeds of its own temporary nature, where every ending serves merely as prelude to the next beginning. The free will paradox that emerges from Link's eternal calling raises profound questions about the nature of choice and agency within cosmic systems designed to ensure specific outcomes. While Link appears to make independent decisions throughout his adventures, the larger pattern of his life follows predetermined paths that suggest either illusion of choice or severely constrained agency that operates within parameters too narrow to constitute genuine freedom. His heroic calling may represent not chosen destiny, but cosmic programming that creates the appearance of choice while ensuring compliance with divine intention. The memory retention mechanisms that operate across Link's incarnations reveal selective preservation that prioritizes certain types of knowledge while systematically suppressing others. Skills related to combat, problem-solving, and mystical manipulation transfer readily between incarnations, suggesting that practical heroic capabilities transcend individual memory systems. However, emotional knowledge, memories of love, loss, friendship, and personal connection appear to be deliberately obscured, perhaps to prevent the paralysis that might result from conscious awareness of eternal separation from those he has loved across countless lifetimes. The predetermined fate that shapes each Link's journey creates philosophical tensions between heroic agency and cosmic determinism that challenge comfortable assumptions about moral responsibility and personal achievement. If Link's success is ensured by divine design, does his courage carry moral weight, or does it represent mere fulfillment of cosmic programming? If his failures would trigger divine intervention to maintain universal balance, do his struggles possess genuine consequence, or do they serve primarily as elaborate performance designed to maintain the illusion of meaningful choice? The identity persistence that maintains heroic consciousness across reincarnations operates according to principles that preserve essential self while allowing for surface variation, creating continuity that transcends individual personality while remaining anchored in recognizable characteristics. Each Link emerges as unique individual with distinct relationships, preferences, and experiences, yet beneath these surface differences lies a consistent core that responds to heroic calling with predictable patterns of courage, compassion, and determination. The cost of repeated world-saving manifests not just in personal sacrifice, but in the accumulation of spiritual debt that grows with each incarnation's heroic service. Link bears responsibility not only for his own actions, but for the consequences of every previous incarnation's choices, creating karmic weight that increases rather than diminishes with successful completion of heroic duties. This accumulating burden suggests that heroic calling may represent not reward for exceptional virtue, but punishment for cosmic crimes that require eternal atonement through service to others. The existential implications of eternal return create unique forms of suffering that transcend ordinary concepts of mortality and finitude. While most individuals find meaning in the uniqueness of their limited existence, Link must discover purpose within cycles that repeat with variations too subtle to provide genuine novelty or surprise. His eternal life may represent not gift, but curse that denies him the defining limitation that gives mortal existence its preciousness and urgency. The relationship between divine will and heroic suffering reveals uncomfortable truths about cosmic justice that suggest gods who value universal order above individual welfare, creating systems that maintain balance through mechanisms that impose infinite burden on chosen servants. Link's eternal service may represent not divine favor, but cosmic necessity that transforms individual consciousness into tool for maintaining universal stability, regardless of personal cost to the tool itself. The breaking points that occasionally appear in Link's psychological structure, moments when the weight of eternal responsibility threatens to overwhelm even his legendary resilience, provide glimpses of the human cost of cosmic calling. These brief instances of vulnerability reveal the price of carrying burdens too vast for individual consciousness while maintaining the facade of normal heroic function that circumstances require. The hope that sustains Link through endless cycles of struggle and sacrifice may itself represent part of the cosmic machinery that ensures his continued service, creating psychological conditions that prevent despair while maintaining the motivation necessary for effective heroic function. This hope operates independently of rational assessment of his situation, suggesting either divine enhancement of his natural optimism or carefully maintained ignorance that protects him from truths that would destroy his effectiveness. The transformation that occurs when ordinary consciousness encounters eternal responsibility creates changes that transcend normal human development to produce beings who exist between mortal and divine categories, while fully belonging to neither. Link becomes something more than human through his accumulated heroic experience, yet remains something less than God through his continued subjection to cosmic forces beyond his control or understanding. The eternal watch that Link maintains across all timelines and incarnations creates a form of cosmic loneliness that cannot be alleviated through conventional companionship or relationship. He exists as singular figure whose experiences transcend those available to any other being, creating isolation that persists despite the connections he forms with others, who cannot fully comprehend the scope of his burden or the depth of his sacrifice. In contemplating the hero's curse and eternal return that defines Link's existence across countless incarnations, we encounter questions about the nature of heroism itself and whether true greatness requires suffering of cosmic proportions. Perhaps the eternal cycle represents not punishment but privilege, the opportunity to serve purposes larger than individual desire while achieving forms of meaning that transcend mortal limitation. Or perhaps it represents the ultimate tragedy, consciousness trapped in patterns too vast to escape, serving purposes too noble to reject, carrying burdens too necessary to abandon, yet too heavy for any individual soul to bear without breaking under their infinite weight. And so we find ourselves at journey's end, having wandered through the countless corridors of Link's existence, from the mundane details of pocket dimensions to the profound questions of identity that span centuries. In our exploration of the seemingly useless, we've perhaps discovered something unexpectedly meaningful, that even the smallest details of a beloved character can reveal the careful thought, cultural influences, and human creativity that breathe life into digital legends. Link remains, as his name suggests, a connection between player and story, between mundane and magical, between the child who first picked up a controller and the adult who still believes in heroes. These trivial facts and forgotten details don't diminish his legend. They enrich it, adding layers of humanity to an icon who has guided countless souls through their own adventures. The pointed ears that hear divine whispers, the green tunic that began as academic accident, the silent voice that speaks volumes through gesture and deed. Each element we've examined tonight contributes to a tapestry of heroism that transcends its digital origins to touch something eternal in the human heart. Whether pondering his impossible inventory or contemplating his eternal curse, we discover that Link's true magic lies not in mystical artifacts or legendary deeds, but in his capacity to inspire wonder in those who journey beside him. Rest now, knowing that somewhere in the eternal cycle of Hyrule's timeline, Link continues his quiet watch, carrying not just the Master Sword, but the dreams and memories of all who have walked beside him on the path of the hero.